There are a lot of Valor Surges to choose from in Horizon Forbidden West, 18 in total, 12 from the base game and 6 new ones added with the Burning Shores DLC, and they definitely do vary in quality from completely useless to a complete game changer. So which Valor Surges are the best in the Forbidden West, and which ones frankly aren't worth your skill points? We're gonna rank them all. And because there are so many options, I've asked my fellow Horizon Creator Guild member, Honest Cake, to help me break some of them down. Hey HC, there are a lot of these. Are you ready to get going?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's go. But before we jump in, let's set just a couple of ground rules. First, I'm assuming all Valor Surges are fully upgraded to level 3. Next, everything I'm showing here is on very hard difficulty, with coils and weaves that you can get in just 1 or 2 playthroughs. Lastly, these are just our opinions based on our preferences and how we like to play the game. If you think differently about any of these rankings, or there's anything that we missed that make these Valor Surges some of your favorite or least favorite, be sure to let us know in the comments below. But let's kick this off alphabetically, starting with Berserk Blast. Now this one might be a little controversial right from the start, but personally, I really like Berserk Blast. I think it's probably the best new Valor Surge that we get from the Burning Shores. Berserk Blast will instantly inflict Berserk on all nearby machines, which will cause them to attack whatever's closest, whether that be Aloy or another machine. It's a great way to cause a little chaos and switch things up, especially when dealing with a large group of machines. But what I really like about Berserk Blast is that it takes what a lot of people consider to be a useless element in Berserk and it makes it better. For one, it automatically inflicts Berserk on machines rather than having it build up, which is useful especially with larger heavyweight machines that typically have a higher tolerance to elemental buildup. And 2, it lasts for a full 60 seconds, whereas regular Berserk only lasts for 30 seconds. And if you're interested, I recently did a deep dive on Berserk and its most effective ways to use it, which I'll be sure to link in the description below. But for Berserk Blast, I'll give this one an A. Up next is the Chain Burst Valor Surge. This is another Valor Surge that I really like to use, and I think it's probably one of the more underutilized ones in the game. Chain Burst will link damage between machines up to 100%, which again makes it a great option when dealing with groups of machines. It also makes it just really fun to play around with in general. If you're going up against a group of machines and want to inflict Frost so you can deal additional damage, or Purge Water so you can negate machines' elemental attacks, Chain Burst is a great option. I also really like the amount of time that it stays active. It gives you a really nice window to deal damage. And if you activate it in stealth, you can take advantage of the additional damage buffs you get for being in stealth. So I went back and forth on this one a couple times, but ultimately I decided that Chain Burst is S tier.
I'm gonna jump in and talk about the next Valor Surge, Critical Boost. This one's all about maximizing critical hits, increasing your critical hit chance by 55% and your critical hit damage by 50%, with an additional 15% hit chance on weapon techniques. Given that critical hits can happen on any ranged weapon, this is a great damage boost in pretty much every situation. There's also an 150% damage boost to critical strikes with your spear, so if you're up close and personal with your foe, that's a pretty significant boost to your damage. The Surge really shines with fast-firing or multi-shot weapons like warrior bows or bolt blasters, especially with the right weapon techniques. Seeing those repeated critical yellow damage numbers on the screen is super satisfying and definitely a point in favor for this Surge. Ultimately, it's a great all-purpose Valor Surge, but given the split focus between ranged crits and melee strikes, I tend to prefer more specialized Valor Surges like Ranged Master or Melee Might. That's going to keep me from putting it in S tier, but it's still on the stronger end of Valor Surges, so we're going to go with A.
Defy Death is another one of the new Valor Surges that was added in the Burning Shores. Essentially, it induces the low health state. The low health build in Horizon Forbidden West can be extremely powerful. It's one of the best ways to deal maximum damage to machines and also increases defenses, making you nearly invincible. So if you like to play in low health or at least want to experiment with a low health playstyle, this could be a good Valor Surge option. But I would say there's not really anything in this Valor Surge that you can't already get through weaves like the Second Chance or low health ranged weaves, and armor skills like the low health ranged or low health defense skills. And if you do want to play at low health, it's easy enough to get there by just hitting a blast trap or gently falling off a cliff, and then you could use your Valor Surge for something else like Critical Boost. So it's not totally necessary, but also not completely useless, so I'll give it a B. Next up, Elemental Fury. Elemental Fury boosts elemental buildup on machines by 200% and the elemental state duration by 100%. This is another decent all-around Valor Surge option, especially in the early and mid game when you don't yet have the most powerful elemental weapons and coils. With Elemental Fury, you're going to be able to build up the element like Frost or Shock more quickly, and because there's a 100% elemental state duration, you're going to be able to keep them there twice as long. This can be especially useful when using Shock because of its ability to immobilize machines, or with Frost because of the increase you'll get dealing impact damage, or with an element like Acid or Fire that deal damage over time. But I find Elemental Fury to be most useful when used in time challenges like in the Hunting Grounds or in the Arena, times in the game where you're challenged to deal a high amount of damage in a relatively short amount of time. I would say once you get to the later parts of the game, when you do have legendary elemental weapons, it's probably not as useful. And there probably aren't too many times during the main or story missions where I'd use it. So it is useful, but definitely situational. So I'm gonna give Elemental Fury a B. Next on the list is Hunter's Mark, another Valor Surge that was added with the Burning Shores DLC. Basically, once you activate the Valor Surge, you mark your target's using your Hunter Bow. Then, while the timer above the machine counts down, you have a 30% increased chance of dealing a critical hit. And if you kill one of the marked machines, you'll also deal shock damage to the remaining marked machines. It's kind of a combination of critical boost and chain burst and power shots, which is one we'll talk about in a minute. But I don't really know what benefit you get from this Valor Surge outside of just getting critical hits, and you only get a 30% chance of getting a critical hit, which isn't really all that much, especially considering critical boost gives you a 55% chance of a critical hit, and it boosts your critical hit damage by 50%. So it seems like it would be better to just use critical boost, which gives you better damage and doesn't rely on you having to mark your targets first. So I'm gonna give this one a C.
Listen, stealth is great and all, but sometimes don't you just want to barrel right through that rebel camp and wreak absolute havoc? The Melee Might Valor Surge lets you do just that. Melee Might gives you 300% more melee damage. That is an absurd amount of damage, especially when paired with outfits like the Osram Artificer. But that's not even the best part. Melee Might gives you infinite spear energy, which means infinite resonator blasts. There are few things in Forbidden West that bring me as much joy as repeatedly slapping resonator blasts onto a machine and watching them all detonate one by one. If you haven't tried this, do yourself a favor and try it out. I realize this surge is far from the most powerful, and it still doesn't really make melee viable against most machines. But if you're like me and you love watching Aloy spin through her melee combos and shred through her foes, this one is a joy to use. I'll put it in B. Erend would be proud.
Yeah, now that's music!
Next up, Override Overdrive, which definitely sounds cooler than it is. But this was another new Valor Surge that was introduced in the Burning Shores, and full disclosure, Machine Master and using overrides in combat is not my preferred playstyle. But Override Overdrive basically superpowers your override. It increases their damage up 150%, and also does some arc shock damage, which I found to be pretty negligible. And once you activate the Valor Surge, the health of your overridden machine will start to decline on its own pretty drastically. So drastically, in fact, that if you use this Valor Surge with your overridden mount, it's gonna kill it really quickly. So if you like your mount, I wouldn't recommend using this one. I find a Claw Strider mount to be a lot more powerful on its own without the use of the Valor Surge. If you like the Machine Master playstyle, I really can't see much of a benefit at all to using this Valor Surge. The plus 150% damage increase you get from your mount didn't really seem to make all that much of a difference to me, and I didn't see any impact at all from the arc damage you supposedly get every 2 seconds. To me, this one gets a D. Next up, Overshield. Overshield is essentially the Shield Weaver armor that you get in Horizon Zero Dawn, which is probably the best armor in that game. With Overshield, you essentially become invincible. Your health bar will turn blue, which indicates the amount of shield you have left, and it'll tick down as your shield takes damage. As far as defensive Valor Surges go, I think this is probably the best one. What makes this one particularly useful is just how long the Valor Surge lasts. If you take enough damage for the shield to deplete all the way, but your Valor Surge is still active, it'll recharge, so you can get kind of a continual damage absorption for the length of the Valor Surge. But this is what I call kind of a last resort Valor Surge. It's really only useful if you're in a bind or a situation that you can't really get out of. Personally, I prefer offensive Valor Surges to defensive ones, so for Overshield, I'm gonna give this one a C.
I'm gonna jump in to talk about one of my favorite Valor Surges, Partbreaker. Forbidden West did a great job at improving the component removal mechanic, with better weapon balancing, more detailed focus scanning, and machines with a greater density of components in general. Just look at the Stormbird versus the Dreadwing. Stripping a machine part by part has become my favorite way to hunt, and Partbreaker makes it all the more fun. It's definitely not the strongest Valor Surge in terms of damage, but I love how it encourages strategy with your hunt. Planning an optimal sequence of components to remove and leaving a machine devoid of its abilities is always so satisfying. Plus, the high knockdown chance that it adds is really useful, especially if you're hunting for specific upgrade resources. All that said, Partbreaker is far from perfect. It'll wreck a Thunder Jaw, but it won't do you very much good against machines with fewer components, like a Fireclaw, or really even against human enemies. It's also got a very short duration, so if you're not efficient with your shots, you might only get 1 to 2 parts off before it ends. So, all that considered, let's put Partbreaker in B.
Next up, Powershots. Powershots gives you increased damage from non-ranged weapons and a plus 200% damage increased with ranged weapons, which is a pretty significant increase in ranged weapon damage, the highest single increase of any of the other Valor Surges, but you only get it for 5 shots. And at first, probably like a lot of players, I shrugged this Valor Surge off. 5 shots just really isn't all that many, but there are a couple of things that make this Valor Surge pretty interesting and at least worth giving a shot, or rather, a power shot. For one, the Valor Surge meter won't deplete until you take your 5 power shots, and weapon techniques like the focus shot weapon technique for the sharp shot bow, or the sustained burst weapon technique for the bolt blaster don't count against your power shots, so it has the potential to stay active for a really long time. Second, you gain concentration back with each successful hit, whether or not you used one of your power shots. So with the sharp shot bow, switching back and forth between regular power shots and the focus shot weapon technique, you can keep the Valor Surge active for quite a long time while also being able to stay in concentration. And third, power shots don't count against your ammo, meaning you can use more resource intensive ammo like elite precision arrows to deal extra damage without depleting those resources. So this one is interesting to me. I'm not quite ready to say that it's A tier or a Valor Surge that I'll be using regularly, but it's definitely worth trying out, so I'm gonna give this one a B. Next on the list is Radial Blast. Radial Blast is another AoE Valor Surge that deals blast and shock damage to nearby machines. The blast damage itself is enough to take out a group of small machines and will take most medium machines down to about half health, so it can be a good way to kick off a fight to either thin out a crowd or get a head start on taking a machine's health down. And if the machine is weak to shock, you'll usually get about half of the shock meter filled up. But honestly, I don't think this one really does much other than just piss off all nearby machines. Once you trigger the Valor Surge, all the machines will know you're there, so you've given up any chance at stealth, and it doesn't really do enough damage or build up enough shock to be much of a benefit against larger machines. I think this one would be better if it would charge up quicker, so maybe you could get 2 or 3 blasts in while the Valor Surge was active. But as it is, for me, this one gets a C. Next up is Ranged Master. What can you say about Ranged Master? It's probably the best all-around Valor Surge in the entire game. Ranged Master increases damage from ranged weapons by 60%, which is great because ranged weapons are already some of the highest damage weapons in the game. It also gives you an extra 40% damage when using a weapon technique like the focus shot weapon technique, which is one of my favorites. And it can be triggered in stealth, meaning you can combine it with the damage buffs you get for being in stealth for even more damage. As an added bonus, you'll gain back a bit of health, about 10%, with every successful hit. If you're looking to maximize damage, no matter the machine or whether you're in the early, mid, or late game, Ranged Master is probably the best Valor Surge there is. So for me, this is an easy S tier.
Moving on to Stealth Stalker. So I've got a little bit of a vested interest in Stealth Stalker. Back in Zero Dawn, I remember seeing all the really interesting in-world uses for machine technology, like humans carrying scrapper radars. I thought, man, wouldn't it be sweet if we ever saw someone make use of Stalker technology? So you can imagine how happy I was to see this Valor Surge in Forbidden West. Stealth Stalker makes Aloy practically invisible, with a 50% damage increase to unaware targets and a 200% damage increase to silence strikes. Stealth is already incredibly powerful in Forbidden West, and this surge just takes it to the next level. It allows Aloys to pick off enemies one by one, finishing them quickly with the damage bonuses and fading out of sight with the invisibility. It really is so satisfying to clear a rebel camp this way. Not to mention, stealth kills will actually restore part of your valor, which prolongs the use of the surge. This is the only surge in the game with this kind of replenishing ability, so that's pretty neat. Unfortunately, outside of rebel camps, Stealth Stalker becomes a little less useful unless you have a dedicated stealth build. In a one-on-one fight against a large machine, for example, you might be better off with a more damage-focused Valor Surge like Ranged Master or Powershots. Still, due to its uniqueness and position as the definitive stealth Valor Surge, I've gotta put it in A.
Next, we have Toughened. Toughened boosts defenses against melee damage by 35%, as well as to different status effects like Crushed and Deafened, and it regenerates your health every 2 seconds while it's active. Like Overshield, this one to me is another last resort Valor Surge. Something you'd probably only use if you were stuck at a certain point in the game or really struggling to get past a certain area or machine. In the early and mid game, I can see this one being most useful when clearing out bandit camps, but overall, I think there's probably just better ways to shore up your defenses using something like low health or even just sneaking around in stealth. And also, the different status effects that it protects you against aren't really something that hinder you too much in the game. Sometimes they can be a little bit annoying, but it's really not something that happens with enough regularity to need a Valor Surge for. I would say though, I do like the amount of time this Valor Surge stays active. It's a pretty generous amount of time compared to other Valor Surges. But other than that, I don't really find this one useful at all, so I'm gonna give Toughened a D. Next up is Trap Mines, another new Valor Surge that was added in the Burning Shores. Basically, you throw out a trap that launches mines that'll explode when a machine runs into them. To be honest, I'm not really sure why anyone would want to waste a Valor Surge on this one. It does seem to work decent on small and medium sized machines, but the amount of damage it does really isn't enough to be particularly effective against large machines, and I think you'd probably be better off just using a high damage weapon like a spike thrower or blast sling, which deals about the same amount of damage, and then you could use your Valor Surge for something else like critical boost or ranged master. I went back and forth on this one, but ultimately couldn't think of a single situation where you'd probably be better off using trap mines. So for that reason, I'm gonna give it a D. Sticking with the Trapper skill tree, and contrary to Trap Mines, I find Trap Specialist to be really useful. Trap Specialist will double trap and tripwire damage, and it increases tripwire elemental buildup by 75%. This can be extremely powerful when paired with a Tripcaster that has elemental ropes like the All-Mother's Blessing Tripcaster, or Tinker's Pride that has explosive ropes. In fact, I have no problem saying that this Valor Surge takes the Tripcaster and makes it one of the most powerful weapons in the game. I recently did a breakdown on Plasma and the most effective ways to use it, and highlighted how you compare the Trap Specialist Valor Surge with the All-Mother's Blessing Tripcaster and the Quickwire weapon technique to easily take out a Slitherfang. I'll be sure to link that video in the description below. But it also pairs really nicely with armor skills like the +2 trap limit skill, or weaves like the Elite Traps Weave, which increases the amount of traps you can place. I think this is another Valor Surge that's really overlooked and can be pretty powerful, so I'm gonna give it an A. And finally, we have Warrior's Vigor, our last Valor Surge and the last Valor Surge that was added in the Burning Shores. Warrior's Vigor is a Valor Surge for all the melee and warrior bow enthusiasts out there. It increases spear and warrior bow damage by 100% and gives you back health with every successful hit. This is another tricky one for me. On one hand, I like that we get a Valor Surge that boosts warrior bows, but on the other hand, warrior bows aren't typically best used for pure damage. The best way to use a warrior bow, in my opinion, is to quickly build up elemental status like frost or even adhesive. But I suppose if you really like to use the warrior bow because of how quick it is, and you're going up against bandits or human enemies that have lower health, it could be a decent option, but I still think you'd probably be better off using something like critical boost. And from the melee side, it gives you 100% increase in spear damage, but compare that to the Valor Surge Melee Might, which gives you a 300% increase in melee, as well as unlimited spear energy, so this one's not really all that useful. I do like that we have a Valor Surge specific for warrior bows, so for that reason, I'll give it a C. And that is all 18 Valor Surges from the Forbidden West and the Burning Shores. But what are your thoughts? Are these ratings accurate? Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments. And special thanks to Honest Cake for helping me out. If you're not already subscribed to his channel, be sure to do so. The link is in the description. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.